Assalamu alaikum, and welcome to the Be Quran podcast. I'm your host, Ali.
And I'm Fatima. In each episode, we unpack the deeper layers of our faith, history, and the challenges facing the Muslim world today.
Today we're asking a profound question. Why is Shia Islam so often seen as the voice of resistance in the face of global injustice?
We'll trace this identity from its roots, starting with our innate moral compass, fitrah, through Quranic commandments and into the lives of figures like Lady Fatimah, Imam Ali, and Imam Hussain.
We'll also look at how this legacy continues today, shaping how Shia communities respond to oppression and why their stance resonates far beyond their own tradition. It's a conversation about principle, sacrifice, and the unshakable commitment to justice.
Let's get into it. Bismillah.
You know, something really fascinating has been happening globally, especially, say, over the last 18 months or so. It's got a lot of people asking this pretty deep question, even folks outside a particular tradition.
Yeah, which question is that?
Well, why is it that some groups seem to consistently stand up against oppression, make their voice heard, while others, well, they seem much quieter?
Ah, right, that contrast. It's noticeable.
Exactly, it's a striking contrast, and that's precisely what we're planning to get into today.
Absolutely. So this deep dive is all about exploring Shia Islam, specifically looking at its historical roots, its theology, essentially why it's often seen as what our source calls it, the voice of resistance.
Right. The source being a recent lecture.
By Dr. Syed Ammar Nakshawani.
Precisely. And he frames it very much in terms of standing against tyranny, against injustice. So our mission here is really to pull out the core ideas from that lecture to understand why. Why is this school of thought seen this way?
Yeah, we're trying to unpack the layers, from basic human nature right through to very specific historical moments and, of course, religious texts.
Okay, sounds good. Let's dive in.
So yeah, if you've been watching world events, like you said, the last year and a half, you might have seen these, well, starkly different responses to certain big issues.
Definitely.
And the source, Dr. Nakshawani, he points out that many leaders outside of Shia thought, he mentions Gulf leaders, Malaysians, Indonesians, Jordanians.
North Africans too, right?
Yeah, North Africans, even the title Amir al-Mu'minin from the Ottoman era. He observes they were often perceived as, well, silent.
Silent in the face of what he calls contemporary bullying figures.
Exactly. Whereas Shia leaders often took a very clear, very vocal stand.
And what's really interesting, and the source really hammers this home, is how this wasn't just an internal observation. Non-Shia people noticed it too.
Right. He mentions comments on videos, people saying things like, I am Sunni, but I agree with him.
Acknowledging the stand the Shia were taking.
Yeah, like recognizing there was something principled maybe happening there when others weren't stepping up in the same way. It suggests this wasn't just internal politics, and he gets specific geographically, too.
He does. He points to places like Yemen, Lebanon, Iraq, Iran, suggesting that the countries really pushing back against this perceived bullying, they often have large Shia populations, or are majority Shia.
Which brings us right back to that core question, doesn't it?
It really does. What is it? What's in Shia thought fundamentally that seems to enable this consistent stand against oppressors? What's the root?
Okay, so that's the central puzzle. And the lecture starts tackling it with something really basic, really foundational, which is innate morality, the concept of fitrah.
Okay, so the idea that it's not just about religion initially.
Exactly. The first layer is, the answer in this perspective is about our innate human nature. We're kind of hardwired, you could say, to know good from bad, like truth is good, lies are bad.
Justice good, injustice bad, that sort of thing.
Precisely. You don't necessarily need a holy book to tell you those fundamental things.
And the source uses some everyday examples, right? Like seeing someone get their bag snatched.
Yeah, or someone being attacked in the street. That impulse most people have to step in or at least feel that something's wrong.
That gut reaction.
Right. And he stresses this isn't just a Muslim thing. It's human. The lecture then connects it to a Quranic verse. By the soul and the one who perfected it, he inspired it to know the good and to know the bad.
So the idea is that God actually builds this moral compass into us from the start.
That's the interpretation. Yeah, the fitrah is God-given. But it's not the whole story, of course.
Right. So where does revelation like the Quran come in?
Well, that's the next layer. Well, fitrah gives you the basic compass. Revelation provides the direction, the map, the boundaries. It guides that innate sense.
Okay, so it gives structure to that inherent feeling.
Exactly. And a really key piece of that guidance, a mandate for resistance in Shia understanding, comes from Surah 3, verse 1 and 10.
Ah, yes. This one's central. It talks about being the best nation.
Raised up for mankind. But why? Not because you pray or fast, the verse says, but because you enjoin what is right and forbid what is wrong.
Right. And believe in Allah. That active role, forbidding evil, is crucial. And the Prophet, peace be upon him, apparently outlined levels to this.
3 levels?
Yeah. Level 1, the absolute minimum is that your heart feels pain when you see injustice.
Your heart bleeds for it. And the source emphasizes not everyone even reaches that level, right? Some hearts don't bleed.
Sadly, yes. So that internal acknowledgement, that pain, is the first vital step.
Okay, what's level 2?
Level 2 is using your tongue, speaking out.
Actively voicing opposition.
Exactly, like the early Muslims did, even when it was dangerous, using your words as a tool of resistance.
And the final level.
Level 3, picking up a sword.
So, physical defense.
Physical defense, yes.
Yeah.
The willingness to actually fight, even die, to stop injustice. Because, as the source puts it, kind of bluntly, the only certainty in life is death.
Wow. That's quite a progression from internal feeling to ultimate sacrifice.
It really shows a deep commitment. And is not just about feeling bad, it's about acting. And the Quran gives further basis for this too. Like in Surah 22,
Verses 39 to 40, it explicitly gives permission to those who have been oppressed, forced from their homes just for believing in Allah, permission to fight back.
So, framing jihad here very clearly as self-defense.
Absolutely, as a struggle against being subjugated, not as, unprovoked aggression.
And there's another really strong verse the source highlights, isn't there?
Oh yes, very powerful. Surah 11, verse 113, "And do not incline toward those who do wrong, lest hellfire touch you."
And it adds, and you have not other than Allah any protectors.
Right, don't lean on the oppressors for support. The lecture even uses a modern example, mentioning Piers Morgan.
Oh, how so?
Well, the point being made was how someone might initially seem to align or defend certain actions, but the moment they deviate even slightly, that supposed support vanishes. The oppressors turn on them.
Ah, I see.
So, the takeaway is?
The core belief articulated is, you cannot trust those who don't fear God, because if they don't fear God, they won't fear turning on you either. Their support is unreliable.
So, leaning on them is not just wrong, it's strategically foolish in the long run. That's the strong implication.
You ultimately have no real guardians except Allah when dealing with oppressors.
Okay, so we have this foundation. Innate morality, fitrah, plus clear Quranic commands to resist evil and not align with oppressors.
Right, but it's not just abstract principles. This voice of resistance is deeply embodied in historical figures, starting with the prophets themselves.
Yes. The lecture argues that every prophet was, in their own way, a voice of resistance. King David versus Goliath, Moses versus Pharaoh.
Jesus challenging the authorities, and not just against physical threats, but
Economic injustice, social wrongs.
exactly. It's a broad understanding of resistance. And this legacy continues very powerfully, according to the source, with the figures Shia Muslims revere.
As imams, absolutely. And the lecture points to Lady Fatimah az-Zahra, the Prophet's daughter, as pivotal.
calling her the first Shia of Imam Ali.
Yes, and maybe the first to die for this cause of upholding rights and resisting injustice within the community.
Her specific act being,
Speaking out, publicly challenging the first caliph, Abu Bakr, over what she saw as the usurpation of her husband Ali's rights and the confiscation of her land, Fadak.
and she was very young at the time.
Only about 18, but she refused to be silent. She faced the consequences, even requested a secret burial. Her stand was defiant.
So she sets a kind of template, standing up for rights, especially against powerful figures, even at immense personal cost.
Precisely. And her stand is remembered and commemorated annually by Shia Muslims. It's a living legacy.
Then there's Imam Ali himself, his famous advice.
On his deathbed, yes, oppose the oppressor and support the oppressed.
And critically, the source notes, this isn't
Just about supporting oppressed Muslims. No, it's universal. Support anyone who is oppressed.
It broadens the scope of that responsibility significantly.
That's a key distinction. And then Imam Hussain, there was a story about him.
Ah, yes, a beautiful, poignant story. Someone asked him the distance between heaven and earth. And his answer,
He said it was the cry of,
an oppressed person, in dua, in prayer.
wow. Meaning that cry, that prayer from someone suffering injustice, reaches Allah instantly. There's no distance. It underscores this profound empathy for the oppressed.
So this thread of empathy in action runs deep through these early figures.
Deeply woven, yes. Which leads us inevitably to Imam Hussain.
Presented in the lecture as the absolute peak, right?
The greatest voice of resistance, unquestionably. The confrontation with Yazid, the Umayyad Caliph, Yazid demanding allegiance or death.
Right, and the source draws a direct line, a parallel between that situation and contemporary ones. It explicitly calls a figure like Netanyahu.
A Yazid of today, that's the source's framing.
Okay, noted. And Hussein's response to Yazid's demand
The famous line, a man like me,
does not pledge allegiance to a man like him, just absolute refusal to bow to tyranny. But it wasn't just about defiance for defiance's sake, was it? What was his stated mission?
No, he was very clear. He said he wasn't seeking fame or power or to cause corruption. His goal, he said, was to bring reconciliation in the Ummah community of my grandfather by doing exactly what the Quran mandated, enjoining good and forbidding evil.
And the lecture clarifies something important here about negotiation.
Yes, this is crucial. Imam Hussain didn't just march towards conflict blindly. He actively sought negotiation. He tried to find peaceful solutions.
Even right up until the end.
Even on the night before Ashura, the day of the battle, he offered alternatives. Let me go back to Medina, let me go to the frontier, let me speak to Yazid directly.
Well, actually, the source mentioned returning to Medina or going to Kufa as options he proposed, but these efforts were blocked.
Thwarted, yes, by hardliners in Yazid's camp, figures like Shamir bin Talha, even though the commander, Omar bin Saad, was apparently more inclined towards finding a way out.
So the point the source makes is,
Shia are willing to negotiate. They seek peace, but, and this is the key phrase used, they are not bullied into negotiation.
okay, so when negotiation failed and he was faced with just two choices, submit to Yazid or face death,
That's when he uttered that other defining phrase, Hayat minadillah, never will we be humiliated. Humiliation is worse than death.
and this choice, martyrdom over submission, became
As the source puts it, the DNA of the Shia.
a principal stand, not, as the source clarifies, being bloodthirsty.
Exactly. It's about dignity, principle, refusing injustice, even at the cost of life itself. And his martyrdom, paradoxically, ensured his message didn't die. It remains alive, yes, inspiring generations. That suffering, that stand, it echoes
The source even mentions that painful detail.
of his final farewell from Medina. leaving his grandfather's grave and his mother, Fatima's.
Yes, and the lecture adds this poignant, almost mystical element of communication from her grave, foretelling the horrors of Karbala, mirroring her own suffering, but amplified.
Losing ribs, losing a child.
Deeply ingrained suffering and resilience.
Absolutely. And you see the impact today. The lecture quotes Imran Khan.
The former Pakistani PM?
Yes, saying something like, the Shia have...
The martyrdom of Hussein in their blood. You cannot push them easily.
And that quote from the Sunni Palestinian woman?
Yes, that was powerful. Observing the Shia rituals of chest beating for Hussein and reflecting,
Maybe we should start doing that too, because if mourning Hussein made them men of principle, maybe we need that too.
that's a striking observation, acknowledging the connection between that commemoration and a principled stance.
It connects Hussein's historical stand to contemporary struggles and the loss of good people who embody that spirit.
So the legacy is very much alive. And the deep dive doesn't end there, does it? It looks forward.
Right, it concludes by touching on the belief
In the final Imam, Imam Mahdi, who is a descendant of Hussein.
a grandson, yes, and his role is seen as the ultimate fulfillment of justice. He's the one who will finally transform a world full of tyranny into one full of justice. And there's a connection back to Hussein even there.
A direct connection. The belief is that Imam Mahdi will avenge the holy blood of Hussein. His arrival is the ultimate answer to that cry of the oppressed that Imam Hussain spoke of.
The tears for Hussein being like blood.
Yes, signifying the depth of that tragedy and the eventual rectification. It provides this eschatological hope, a future guarantee that justice will prevail, which also fused the present struggle. So, wrapping this up then, what we've explored is how Shia Islam, from this perspective, sees itself as this continuous voice of resistance.
Yeah, built on layers, that innate moral sense, the fitrah.
Then reinforced by very specific Quranic commands to stand against evil, to not yield to oppressors,
And then powerfully embodied in the lives.
and legacies of the prophets, and especially the imams.
With Imam Hussein's stand at Karbala as the absolute defining moment, right? That refusal to accept humiliation, choosing martyrdom instead, becoming central to the identity.
And providing ongoing inspiration.
Is it a complex mix of theology, history, and lived experience?
A commitment that's not just theoretical, but manifests in action, in a willingness to sacrifice for those principles.
Exactly. A deep-seated sense of duty towards justice.
Which leads us, as always, to a final thought for you, our listeners, to maybe mull over. We've unpacked these really deep historical and theological roots of resistance within Shia thought. So the question is, given these foundations, what might it actually take for these principles, this idea of consistently standing against injustice, really taking a stand? What would it take for that posture to become more, let's say, universally adopted across different communities, different traditions, especially facing the global challenges we see today?
That's a big question.
Something to think about. Thanks for joining us on this podcast episode.
Until next time, stay curious, stay grounded, and keep seeking the truth.